We're having a little bit of a glitch this afternoon, but I want to thank you, Siddharth, for joining me in all my tech glitch glory. I'm excited to talk with you today about neuroscience and being an entrepreneur, because you're also a small business owner. I am your host, Marissa Lowen. This is Big Questions Medium Coffee. I have more than a medium coffee, so we have lots to talk about today. I'm excited to get started. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you do in the world?
Hi, everyone. I'm Siddharth Ramakrishnan. I am a neuroscientist. I started off in computer science, but then I saw the light of the world and I moved into neuroscience for my PhD. I work a lot with small animal models like snails and fish and rats and look at their brains. So if you ever want to learn about snail bikini brains, you can hit me up anytime.
I love that's such a good offer, right? Like, it's such a good. If you ever need to talk about snail brains, I'm there for you.
Yes, I'm there for you. Actually, it was through my PhD, it served as a great bar room conversation. Anytime you walked into a bar, you're like, what do you work with? I work with snail brains. And it was great conversation. But along the lines, I kind of found out that a lot of cool stuff was happening in the world of neuroscience, but people were not getting access to it because it's always hidden behind these journals or scientists who are not willing to talk about their work. So I decided that I wanted to really communicate that. And at the same time, I also got a deck of tarot cards from my sister, and I started exploring them and really thinking about what does it mean to hold a deck of tarot cards and look at them. And it's really amazing. So when we look up at clouds, we see patterns all the time. Or when we look at a mosaic floor, we see patterns and we start making stories and narratives. And this is kind of what we're doing also with things like tarot cards or looking at astrology charts or, just face reading or something like that. Your brain is trying to make sense of it and make those intuitive leaps of faith to then say, okay, this is what's happening, or this is what this means. And you're always trying to make sense of the world. So I kind of want to delve a little bit into those aspects of, okay, what is going on? And can I convey this message to an audience which has kind of been told, oh, this is all woo-woo, none of this makes sense. And you're always putting them down, or they always feel judged when they are approaching this. So I kind of want to demystify that a little bit and break it down and say, okay, this is what happens when you see an image. And then what happens when you use that image to form these interpretations, and how is then that used for intuition, and how do you gain insight from it? And, it's just serendipitously, or you could say the universe was talking to me. I live in Seattle, and right when I was researching this, I came across this bookstore, which was, I guess, existed for a long time in Seattle, called the Metaphysical Bookstore, which is in a basement in like Ballard in Seattle. And I discovered this place and wandered in, and I found all these books on reading the tarot, which were mainly written by psychologists and biologists. And I was like, okay, you know what? I'm not like super far off. And so I used that research and I decided to design my own deck of cards where I infuse neuroscience knowledge into tarot. And I also give people a little booklet on, what goes on in the brain when you're looking at these things. So you can use them as a neuroscience tool to learn about neuroscience. You can use them as tarot way of kind of interpreting tarot, but using neuroscience, or just play with it as you want. So kind of some of these cards, oops, it's like a whole, always an art to try and figure out where the video is.
But these are beautiful. First of all, these are beautiful. Hold up one of them like really close so people can see. Okay, so fertility. Oh, that's an interesting card. Now, okay. So then we have pituitary. Okay, so all right. So tell us a bit about this card. What does this card mean?
So the fertility card in the regular tarot deck is kind of considered the Empress card,
Yep.
and so your sometimes it signifies pregnancy. It could also be when your project is coming to fruition, you're really invested in things, and you're at the height, you're at the goddess level, you're at
Yeah.
the peak performance. And for me, it was a really beautiful card because when you think about fertility or producing things, there is this structure in your brain that is the master control of all hormones. And it is the one that makes you go through puberty. And when you're going through pregnancy and childbirth, it releases hormones. So it kind of sends these messages all across your body to coordinate things. So that's kind of what the pituitary is about. And so it's kind of thinking about, okay, when your fertile imagination, when you're trying to, hone your passion, what hormones are kind of going through you. So
Right.
that's the connection I'm trying to draw between like the tarot and the neuroscience. So,
Very cool. Very cool.
and just like tarot, it's the image has some, little bits like a rose budding and it's kind of like blooming, or a message in a bottle that's kind of going across waves. But the structures which are over here are also kind of representative of the neuroanatomy. So that's kind of how the pituitary looks in your brain. So there are some hidden like clues as to if you want to go down that tangent or rabbit hole, you can if you want to. So
That's really cool. I mean, we first met because you were asking questions about having a deck produced, and I was like, yes, I also have a deck produced. And it's really interesting because I love hearing how you went through, like you said, like the vision, like you go from like the envision to the intuition to the projection. And I wanted to do almost like the exact opposite of having no visual other than the kind of the sigil on the back, but having the question be so bare so that people didn't infer anything from the card, that they could actually ask that question, everything from, so it's like a bare, it's just like the question. Oops, yeah, gotta find where the camera is. This one says, how are you living on purpose? And it was like, I didn't want to have any other, and I thought about it. I was like, okay, what kind of images? I'm a creative person. I wanted to have all the, and I thought, no, I want to take away all of the like extra periphery just so they could focus on the words. You have the vision in there, which helps you start to kind of create that connection between your body and the world, because you have the floral, so it's not just about what's going on inside you, it's how you actually interact with the world around you and the world inside you.
that's kind of interesting because the way you mentioned all of these things, because one thing that came up in my research is different people have different levels of visual imagery.
Yes.
And so because, you're all different learners. So if I ask you to close your eyes and imagine a sunset, right? Some people can imagine like this vivid colors and they can see the picture, the sun setting, and other people can imagine like a cartoon, like a two hills, the sun like in the middle, like coming down. But and I am not. I realize I don't have a vivid visual imagination. So when I close my eyes and say sunset, I actually can see the words sunset in my head.
Yeah.
And I don't actually have a picture that's like super vivid or visual. And so it's kind of interesting what you see when you close your eyes and how your brain perceives these things. And then similar to what you said, you have those words, you ask a question. How do you move from that? What is your life purpose? You ask that, right? When you hear those words or see those words, how do you then form those connections and move to that next stage? I associate this with this. And it's actually the brain circuits behind it are pretty fascinating. And I think the mind is so cool that everybody should know about it, which is kind of part of this whole project and the courses I'm creating, is to kind of let people know, what, this is your mind, discover it. I'm really excited about it. So yeah.
Yeah, and I love it. And part of it too is like, I mean, I'm sure you've seen this too, as people interact with your cards. I mean, it's like the best gift ever to see people interact with things that you create. But I know like when somebody picks like something like that, for example, like, what is your life's purpose? it means so many different things. Like some people will be like, oh, it's interesting that I got a purpose card. And then they'll talk about, what that brought to mind. And sometimes it is visual, and sometimes it's more words, and sometimes it's a song. And I've always just been so fascinated with how there are no like wrong answers. There's people are like, how should I answer this? I'm like, however it comes up for you, because that's you. That's your power in there. What are things that you've noticed when people interact with your cards?
The things I notice is, first of all, tarot. Looking back, maybe I would have changed the words, but tarot itself has a lot of significance to people. Some people are like, "Oh no, I don't want to go anywhere near it because it's all
Yes.
like bad juju kind of stuff."
Yes.
Whereas other people are like curious about it, and then they pick it up. Um, and it's when you first talk about neuroscience, some people are like skeptical because you're like, oh, I don't want to do another learning thing. But then
Yeah.
they pick it up and you're like, oh, I actually learned something with this. And I teach neuroscience as a profession, so I've kind of played with it with some of my students, and they're like, oh wow, I wish I had these as, just to learn, get the fun into it, as opposed to
Yes.
reading a textbook or something like that.
Yes.
And I've had some folks tell me they actually use them regularly, not just in terms of tarot interpretations, but kind of as a self-reflection of, today I'm going to think about this body part or this
Mm-hmm.
function that's in me, which I don't normally consciously think about. Which
Mm-hmm.
is kind of an interesting self-reflection, because we are physical beings, but we don't normally think about all the different operations that are going on. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
good way of self-reflecting and thinking about, you know, oh, this brain of mine has this little function, or oh, I have the capacity to regenerate, or something like that. So those kinds of, it
Mm-hmm.
kind of brings you back into your the magic of your body in a way. So.
Yeah, and it's really interesting how easy it can be for us to disassociate with our body. Like it's like you just sort of forget. I've had a few bad car accidents, and I didn't really think about the fact that my body had just adjusted to not using major muscle groups in my movement until I started, having them activated and being intentional and focusing. Like, no, you actually have to move that muscle, and it's like, what do you mean I have to move that muscle? Of course, I'm walking, and they're like, like I had physio. They're like, you are not even using, like it's not even firing, like it's just sort of being there. And I thought, like, how is this possible? But because the body is so like adaptive, it's just like, all right, we just don't use that. We'll just figure out how to, use other parts. And like you said, it's like coming into that parts of your body. Like I think of like, if I sit there and actually focus on my pituitary, or I focus on, like these parts that I kind of take for granted, it really does, like it focuses you on your experience in the world.
Yeah, and it's more, and part of the research, and something I cover in one of my courses, which I'm offering, is it's more than that. It's also when I ask you, how are you feeling, happy or are you feeling sad? So you use expressions like, oh, I feel lighthearted today and I'm feeling all happy, or I have butterflies in my stomach, so I'm nervous about something. And you use all these metaphorical expressions, which are connected. Emotions are connected to different parts of your body,
Right.
but it's not metaphors, it's real, because your body has all these centers, nerve centers, which are then sent to your brain, and your brain interprets those different changes in your body as, oh, you know what, my heart is getting constricted, that means I'm feeling anxious. So your brain is actually interpreting your body signals into, this is what this emotion means. And so I cover like a whole segment of that, because part of, I think, tarot reading, or just talking to people, is to assess, is this person feeling sad, is this person feeling happy, and how am I feeling? So when I look at this, am I reacting to this because my body is interpreting it in a certain way? So I was not, even as a neuroscientist, I was not super aware or familiar with those kinds of research, but looking into this has really dropped me into that, and exploring more and more about the body brain connection and the emotions, and how much of your emotions. And one fun exercise I give is this kind of body maps, and then you're supposed to just use crayons or color pencils to draw like where you feel heat and cold when you
Oh.
are feeling different kinds of emotions.
Oh, cool.
And it's really fun. And research has kind of shown that everybody across different cultures feel the same kind of heat and withdrawal in different parts of their body for similar emotions. So
Yes. I love that. And it's interesting because when we talk about like, neurovariant human beings where we all kind of process and interact with the world, when you start to see some of those similarities, I might be feeling it, but I can't necessarily always communicate in the same way, but we do share those commonalities. And that's where I feel like some of these underlying, body functions is where we can actually be connected with people when we can't otherwise be connected, whether it be by culture or distance or just like communication styles.
Yeah, the neurotypical and the neuroatypical is really fascinating for me, and I've kind of organized a speed dating event around for neuroatypical, discussing the concept of being neuroatypical. And the way we do it is we invite scientists, artists, social workers, and even folk on the different neuroatypical spectrum to come and when we sit them in front, we kind of see them just like a speed dating, and then we put like a chart in front of them with color pencils and stuff. So you can either talk to the person in front of you or just draw. And then we kind of infuse a little like talk right in the beginning to some talking points, and then say, okay, how are you going to discuss these themes? And then people either talk or they draw, and then they keep moving to one person to the other. And then there's kind of these drawings emerge.
I love it. I love it. What an interesting, I'd love to do something like that for like business owners and clients, like if you've got like a particular topic and you want to bring people together, it would be so interesting to see how they create like ideas using the different methods like that. That's so cool. How did you come up with that idea?
So I've been thinking. So I've been working a lot with artists over the last 15 years or so. Even though my training background is a scientist, and
your background is snails, and you moved into artists.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, like how as a scientist, you sometimes feel very lonely because you're stuck in a lab sometimes and you have no way of communicating your love for the work with the rest of the world. And yeah. So I found that art and museums and art spaces were a way to kind of collaborate and break down some of those barriers and kind of reach an audience, a larger audience. So that's kind of how that started. And this particular idea was something I was working in a ethics lab in a hospital in Montreal for about 6 months, and I was talking to a lot of the local artists. And speed dating is a way I met a few collaborators and also my partner. So
amazing. You just set up your own dating event to find your partner. I get it. Oh, that's amazing. I did a similar thing. I was an artist and looking for places to sell my art. And so I just started creating my own shows and having, and that's how I met like my business partners too. So I get that. That's smart. I like it.
So, and then I realized that we are limiting ourselves by, engaging in speech or presentations, especially when you're talking about neuroatypical or people who are not, who don't want to be in those areas. You need a different way of bringing them in. And that's kind of why I thought, maybe you don't have to make eye contact. Maybe you can just have a thing in front of you and do your own thing, right? And that's what we do when we have kids and they are playing with clay or like making their own thing. They're doing their own thing, parallel play almost. So why not?
It's always funny. There's that game, I can't remember what it's called now, but there's that game where like you pull a card and you're either going to draw or you're going to make something into clay or you're going to draw it or you have to act it out. There's all these different kind of modalities. And I always thought it was funny because you play with a big group of people and you quickly see among your friends what their preferred method of communication is, like very quickly. And then you have to adapt. You have to kind of go, okay, this is it. Like they're good at this or they're not good at this. So how do I still communicate in order to win the game? I can't remember what it's called, but it's like, it's a really good, fun way to kind of realize that we're not all experiencing the same thing in the world.
Yeah. I would love to see that game. Actually.
I'll find it. My friends always have it, and they're like, "Do you want to play it?" I'm like, "Yes, but only if I can pick certain cards." Which is, of course, it doesn't ever work that way. You always get the one that you're not good at, like repeatedly in a row. You're like, "Okay, well, I guess I'm gonna do charades again." Great, and all your team members are like, "Maybe just we'll just like pick." But yeah, it's a good. I'll send you the name. I'll find it and I'll send you the name of it. But it's good. It was a good way to like. Even before I got diagnosed with autism, like I got to see, I'm like, okay, how I communicate is not how my friends communicate. What can we do in order to still be friends, first of all, but also to build together and to be on a team? And that's kind of like, I've grown with that, you know, in my business and my people who work with me and my clients, because it's like, we're not always going to be experiencing the same thing. So how do we create these methods? So tell me something. You've been working with artists. What's your favorite thing about working with artists?
I don't know if all artists are this way, but as a scientist, when I work, you develop a hypothesis, you think through the experiment, you plan everything out, and then you execute it, and then your final product is released when everything is perfect and you kind of thought through the whole thing. Whereas the artists I've worked with are more playtesting, so they put it out in the audience, see the audience interaction, and then they go and reiterate it, and then they come back and rejigger it. So there's a lot of experimentation, but in a very different sense that's going on, and the lack of or rather the courage that they have to put it out there to an audience and then seeing their reaction and coming back has really helped me think about my own practice as a scientist and how I think of experiments and how I would like to do my science itself. So that's something I found really great. And then the other thing I really learned was, again, passing judgment on people on how much research they do and how much knowledge they have. I really worked with an eco artist who was so well read, and when we were talking, I was the flaky scientist, and she was this intense artist, and it was this flipped roles almost. And I realized, all these labels are kind of, it makes no sense, and that and that courage that artists have in putting things out there, I thought was that's something I've really learned and taken to heart. So
I think
which is kind of why these cards even came about, because otherwise it wouldn't have. Just do it. Just put it out there, see what happens, kind of thing. So
yeah, I think, I think I have an advantage when I became an artist or sort of pursuing my creativity. I mean, they say you're once an artist, always an artist, but I watched a lot of Bob Ross as a child. My mom loved painting, and she would just sit for hours and watch the Bob Ross. We had them all taped. And I think it was like, I really learned that happy little accident. Like, he's like, oh, now there's a tree there. And it wasn't like he planned it. It was just that his paintbrush accidentally touched the canvas as he was doing something else, and then it became a happy little accident. Or like, he didn't like these trees, so he just made it into a river, and those were the reflections shining through. Like, all of those kind of things where it was like okay to make mistakes and it would still turn out into something. I really love that, and I really leaned into that. And I think when I work with a lot of artists. We have in my other business, we have a huge database of artists, and when I think about the artists who I know will make it like a full time, are the ones, like you said, they're willing to put out their stuff before it's even perfect. Like, here's what I'm working on. Who wants this? Who's ready to fund my next iteration of this? And people do buy it. And it's like, I think if you can get past that kind of need for it to be entirely perfect. And this is a really good segue into being a business owner. Like you said, if you hadn't learned that lesson, you wouldn't have made those tarot cards.
Yeah, definitely. And it also allowed me to explore my artistic side as well. It's, I designed these cards on my own. I rendered them. I used watercolor pens and stuff like that. So even though I never got formal training, I used to paint before, but it kind of went in the back burner. So allowed me to kind of come back to it on some level. And then thinking about design and those kinds of principles. So allowed me to kind of engage all of me,
Mm-hmm.
and instead of just bits of me. So I think that
Mm-hmm.
way, it really, I think in some ways, um, this whole business that I've created feels like it's a way for organically for having different sides of me come together. And another challenge that I feel like I've put myself on is I always felt I don't have that business brain, or I don't have that ability to do that, think about money that way. But I kind of said, why would I want to think that way? So I kind of, it's forced me to think of, I do have this ability to think of it as a business. I do have this ability to think of it on a practical level, as opposed to just on an esoteric level or something like that. So.
Oh, I say every business owner is a scientist, or good business owners are scientists, because one, you have to be willing to try out something. You have to have planning. So like think about like a scientist. If you are pitching a study, what's all the work that you have to do to prove, to get the funding, to do all that. You do all of that for a business as well. You're planning it. You have a budget. You've got people that are working with you. Those are all good elements of a good business. And you have to be willing to be wrong.
Yeah, yeah, I'm discovering that as I go along. You think it's going to go a certain way. So when I started the tarot cards, I thought, okay, this is it. This product, and that's kind of what it's going to be. And then at some point, it shifted, and I've been thinking more about these courses that I'm launching
Yeah.
as a way to engage with my audience, and as a revenue stream, which I was not thinking about before. And now I'm thinking about calendars and other kinds of products which were not in my head before. So it's like the pivot aspect of it is something that I'm learning as I go along, and that's kind of what makes it a lot of fun, actually, also. So.
Yeah. I mean, I started off with a little box of big questions, and now I have the big questions medium coffee. I have the little podcast of big questions. I have, like I have a planner with the questions, and it's amazing how it keeps going. So it sounds like you are well on your way into being a full business owner as your ideas start to go. That's a sign. I have one person who has like an idea, and that's the only idea they have. I'm like, what's that like? Because I certainly don't know how it goes. I'm always constantly thinking of new things all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I always used to think it was a bad thing that this, almost like a scatterbrain, you think of these things, but
Oh,
then over time, I just realized, that this is great.
yeah.
That's the only way you can function at a certain level, I think. So.
Yeah, and you have to be willing to like pivot. I mean, we've seen over the last couple years, like if you have a business, I had an in-person event business.
Hmm.
It wasn't going to happen in the last 2 years. It's still not going to happen this year fully. So, it's like, how do you pivot that? How do you turn what you know and create still an income, because you still have to pay your bills. You still have to do all this kind of stuff. So having that kind of brain that thinks about what's, what the next thing, or starts to anticipate things, which brings me to your course. So you are now taking what you learned with your tarot, and now you have this course where you look at visuals. Explain this to me. You look at visuals, and this is where you take that vision to the intuition to the projection. Tell me
Yeah.
about that.
So yeah, I started a new course. It's called Seeing with Your Mind's Eye, and the idea behind that is, whether you're a visionary or an artist or say a tarot reader, when you look at say an object or you read a word, you have a picture of it in your head, and then that then is associated with either other words or emotions, and then that leads to an intuitive guess or an intuitive leap.
Right.
So how do you move from an image, which is just an image, right? I can squiggle something and it's just an image, but it really has no meaning. But somehow your brain is able to connect that image to a meaning, and then
Yeah.
using that meaning, it's using memories and emotions, and then moving into this thing of intuition and saying, oh, I think this is what this means. And so how does that, step by step, how does that happen? And then insight is the next step, which is kind of something that follows intuition. So your intuition is not something you logically know. You just think, you know what, I think I'm going to do this because I think that's right. And you don't know why you made that decision. And insight is something that later on you say, you know what, I think all these things is what led me to this decision. It's like, oh,
Yep.
wow, that's why I did it. So that's like something is, aha, I did this because this happened. That comes later. So, and there's all this cool research that's gone into what parts of your brain do it, and how do you get better at intuition, and how do you get better at insight. And then there's this really cool new research going into this concept of neuroforecasting on how your brain is predictive. And collectively, as a collective group of humans, we are actually really good at forecasting trends and what's going to happen and things like that. So if I ask a group of people, which song do you think is going to be the most popular in 6 months? You might consciously say, this song A is going to be great. But your brain and the brains of everybody around you might be saying, you know what, I think song D is the one that's the best. And it'll turn out that song D is the one that's going to be the most downloaded, right? There's this really cool field of neuroforecasting. So it's applied in things like economics and behavioral economics and things like that. So I was thinking, why not in things like, being visionaries and tarot cards and stuff like that, right? It's kind of the same principle. So kind of tying it all together. And laying it out as to what it means to go from just looking at something to intuitive guess to then maybe making a prediction about something is kind of what I lay it out. So
I need to take this course. This sounds so great. I love this. It is interesting because I'm fascinated about, first of all, I'm fascinated about how we take in information and how we subconsciously take in information. So we know that song D, like we've seen a lot of people maybe bop into it. So we might bring in more information like that. There's a game at the movie theater that like you basically they have like these games before your movie starts, and there's one where it's like you have to guess what's going to be the most popular image out of everybody playing that game. And so it's like part of it is interesting because before we were able to go to the theater, they play it now online on a computer, so you can do it from home. But in the theater, I would look around and kind of make some assessments, like you were saying, like, the people that are in here, the movie we're about to watch, I think they're going to take D. But online, it was interesting because I couldn't see who else was playing with me. We weren't about to watch the same movie. So there was these kind of clues where you kind of had to go, okay, what's been most popular? And I started thinking, like, why would I know that? Like, where did I take in that information and to make that educated guess? It was interesting just to think and just do some track backs, be like, okay, that's why I had that information in my head. It's because I kept seeing the TikTok, or I kept seeing, these kind of things. But I didn't realize I was aggregating all of that data.
Yeah, and you aggregate so much, right? Like, as you mentioned, you're doing like body language, you're doing tone of the person, you're doing eye twitching, you're just accumulating all this information. And of course, if you were aware of all that you're accumulating like in real time, you would probably go bonkers because you would not be able to make sense of it.
Yes.
If you were like, but then your brain has this capacity to subconsciously, as you've said, integrate all of it together and then make that jump. And the reason we have that power of intuition is, of course, evolutionary, like thinking about, should I run from this lion or should I eat this piece of like red fruit? Or you're making these guesses in real time because you need to make those quick guesses to survive.
Yes.
And we're just using it on a different plane right now, but we have that ability. And yeah, it's fascinating. And then we tie it in, of course, with emotion. So your intuitive guesses might not always be the right one, which is fine, right? But it is the one that is going to give you the most, what is called a positive affect, saying, you know what, I'm doing this because I think this is right. And it's giving you that feeling of well-being. And so where's that emotional center also being attached is something that I talk about. So how you connect, these things with emotions and
yeah, it's like the Frank Sinatra song, I may have done it wrong, but I did it my way. Yes. And there's like a feeling of self-satisfaction in there, right? Like I'm in a, actually, I remember, I don't know if anyone else remembers the cartoon Teddy Ruxpin, but like one of the bad like Goombas, like the baddie's sidekick, he gets stuck in like some quicksand and he starts singing that song. And I always have that in my head when we talk about like visuals of like, I may have done it wrong. Like he's like, I made some bad decisions in my life, but here I am. But you know what? I'm going out and I'm proud that it was my decisions and I did it my way. And I always had that in my head. Like that's something I like saw when I was like 5, but I always think of that too. And that's interesting how you said, like, it's because, you know, you trusted your intuition, you gave yourself that trust, and then you took action on it. So it gives you a bit of a higher sense of completion or satisfaction.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Even if I'm sinking in quicksand, it's fine. I did it my way. So, okay, this is exciting. So I ask everybody, I mean, I probably keep talking to you. You have to come back. We have to talk more about this because I want to ask you 10,000 questions, but I also want to make sure that we're finishing, you know, 1 cup of coffee. So I'm going to ask you, as a business owner, things that you've learned, what is an obstacle that you're currently facing in your business?
So the main obstacle I have is marketing. I've been struggling with that a little bit. I like, how do you build your email list, or should you build your email? So different people have different opinions about this. How do you get your audience? And then what I did recently was I did a challenge where I did a 3-day design your own tarot deck challenge. And that was really well received in terms of I got about, within like 3 days, I got 70 people sign up for my email list, and my Facebook group kind of blew up a little bit. But then when it came to people who actually registered for the challenge and, you know, went in, it kind of dropped like crazy. I got like about, I think, 40 people registered, and then only about 6 showed up to the actual challenge. And then by the end of it, only about 3 stuck through, but it didn't convert, right? It didn't actually convert into people buying the course. Right. So maybe it's the first time, you know, I did that thing, and then it was a 6-day challenge. Maybe it was too long, you know, maybe it'll make it a 3-day challenge, make it more concise. So I can see the interest is there, but I kind of need to finesse it a little bit. So I've been thinking about that a lot. Like, how do you reach this audience, and how do you reach your niche target demographic, or, you know, is what, and then which makes me start thinking about, am I marketing it to the right person? You know, do I have my niche? Do I have my ideal customer like narrowed down? Is something I've been rethinking. So, and then of course the fears creep in, right? And then when that happens, it's like, oh no, I'm just going to abandon this and move to something else. And then you're like, no, don't do that. You know, come back. We put so much effort into this. So, you know, come back. So,
well, and I get really excited when people say fears. I know I'm like the weirdo, but like, to me, we were talking about intuition. To me, your fear is just like that part of your intuition. Like you're saying, running from a lion, your fear is like, okay, we have to look at what, you know, what's our exit plans? What's the ground feel like underneath? Same thing from an emotional thing. I would say your fear is probably just asking you to look at different ways of doing things. And it feels like I should go do something else. But really, it's like not good at communicating. It's not really good at asking questions. So it's like, can we look at some other things? And you're like, yes, I'm going to abandon this idea and I'm going to go look at other things. And he's like, no, wait. We like this idea. We just want to look at other things to get it out there. And it's funny because we don't always take the time, like you were saying, to like really listen to our intuition or to know that it's the right thing. So here's one thing I will say. So you wanted people to get into the course for the vision, what we were just talking about, right? So I think you have a really cool thing and a really cool way of getting people in. You have your tarot deck, which of course you want to sell. You want to sell part of your tarot deck as well. But you have all of those visuals in those tarot decks. You can be sharing them, TikTok, Pinterest, Reels on Instagram, and asking people, what does this visual mean to them?
Yeah.
What kind of intuition do they get out of it? Here's a random card pull of the day. Then you start talking about the visuals. You talk about how your brain processes that, and then you tell them about your course.
I think that's a great idea, and I've kind of started that with a YouTube channel, which I've been kind of again finessing a little bit. But I like what you suggested because it's like a random card pull and how do you interpret it? Because one reason I feel I've been holding back is this dichotomy of being a scientist who's designed a tarot deck, right? And so when I'm pulling a tarot card and I'm like, oh my God, am I like going to destroy my scientific reputation? So I need to dive all in and be like, completely into it, as opposed to having this again fear holding me back, and just say, you know what, I have this thing and we're just going to like share it with the world.
Yeah, and I think your fear is actually saying, your fear is giving you the answer. It's the how does it work for me? How do I marry both my being a scientist with me looking at this other side of things, and how do it does it work inside of me, and communicating that. So your fear isn't like you're going to lose your legitimacy. You're actually gaining your legitimacy on both sides because you're communicating why it works for you.
Yeah, thank you. That really helps.
Yeah, and I get it, because like I have a woo side and I'm also a business coach, and I'm a practical business coach. I mean, yes, there is mindset. We work on things like that. But I'm like, let's get out a budget and let's actually plan. Someone asked me, a client asked me about like coaching, and I was like, hey, first of all, do you have your cost to produce spreadsheet done yet? And they're like, no. I'm like, go do that, and then we'll start talking about what it actually, like the mindset you have to do. If we don't know what kind of numbers we're trying, so I get it, but at the same time, I firmly believe that when I shuffle those cards, and something pops out, it's because I needed that particular one at this particular time, not every other card, right? So it's like marrying that. But I talk about that all the time and bring it in, and it provides legitimacy for people who are also going through that, where they've got these two sides of them, especially scientists and creatives, which to me, creatives and scientists are the same. Like they're the exact same. They're willing to test things out. They have to be willing to be wrong. That color did not go with that. The snails did something completely different than what we expected. Like there's such similarities. And I think we often think we're a world apart, and we're not.
You're not, yeah.
Okay, so now we get to talk about what's an opportunity that you have in your business. What's something coming your way that you can take advantage of?
So you asked me this, and I've been thinking about that. And one thing I feel I'm really good at is making science really easy and accessible for folks, and kind of because I think I'm passionate about it and infusing that excitement into it. And
so I've been smiling the entire time you talking. You have this like, and like I said, like when I put it out, people are like, oh my gosh, this person's amazing. Like your bio, you have to understand. I said to my husband, like, this is how bios should be written. Like this is the bio that excites me to talk to this person. And we've only met casually over line. So yes, I fully believe this. You do have this. You are going to make science accessible and fun. And I love that.
And I think that is kind of where my opportunity is. And I kind of been now thinking about delving into, children's books, or, kind of going into that direction as well. And kind of, I think also because I think the curiosity that we have, we kind of shut it down, like, and kind of making sure that curiosity lives throughout. And reimagining science communication. In fact, once upon a time, when I was initially envisioning my website, I was thinking about science, wonder, joy is kind of what I was thinking about. And now, now I'm thinking of going back to that a little bit. And I think that is, and if anyone, I feel like the other thing is with the other opportunity I feel I bring is I work with everybody. And you could be doing some random thing, and I would be really interested and curious about what you're doing. And I could then help you with infusing, what's going on, what is the brain doing in something like this, or thinking about it and brainstorming about that. So I think I'm bringing that aspect of things and elevating other folks, plans or ideas by bringing a different perspective into it is something I've been thinking about. Also because I love working with people, and talking to people with different kinds of ideas. So that's the other thing I've been thinking of.
Yeah, it's an interesting. That's kind of one of the reasons why I started this and not having any pre-interview and going live. And some people are like, "That's really risky." I'm like, well, yeah, but yes, but just call me MacGyver. I'm willing to like everything. You just need a paperclip and I can get out of any kind of, but you know what the thing is too, is like, I think everybody has a perspective and everybody has a viewpoint, and they have got there through their own learned experience, their lived experience, and their personal bias. And I think if we continue to kind of, push people over to the one side because they maybe don't think like us, or they don't look like us, or they don't, like all of these, they don't like snails, we make these like preconceived things about them. We need to start having conversations. We need to start having this openness. And I mean, it takes the other person, it takes two to tango, as they say. But like the other person has to be kind of open to that too. But I want to have more of these conversations and see these different perspectives. I'm not going to agree with everybody that comes on here, but I sure do want to hear where they came from and how they created that. We need more of this. So I love that you're doing this. I think this is an excellent opportunity. Thank you for doing this. Like I said, I have like 10,000 other questions for you. So I think we're gonna have to book another one. And like I just literally had an open smile. I don't even like smiling. The entire time I like look over, I'm literally like listening to you like this. And I was like, what am I doing with my face? Like I literally had like an out of body, like, what am I doing with my face over there? But it's just, you have this energy and you are like, I love how you come at the ideas and proceed. So I have more questions. Let's book another time. I want to thank you so much for spending a coffee with me and having this chat. I'm excited. We will put out links for your tarot, but how can they find you? What's the best way for them to find you?
So my website is www.brainmystic.com, and that has information also about the tarot cards and also the course that I've launched. And you can sign up for my mailing list on that as well. When you sign up for my mailing list there, you get like 6 cool facts about different animal brains, from zombie cockroaches to bikini brains of snails and other kinds of cool stuff. So, and I send out like a weekly newsletter along with that. And my YouTube channel is also Brain Mystic, where each week we are discussing one neuroscience concept at a time and demystifying it. So, yeah.
I love it. Okay, we'll make sure we got all those links hooked up in the various channels afterwards. If you're watching this live, thank you for joining us. Of course, we will have the replay up on the YouTube. The podcast will be up shortly on all the places where you can listen to podcasts. Thank you so much, Siddharth. This has been amazing.
Thank you so much.
You are, like I said, I have so many questions.
Thank you so much for the invite. It's been such a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see what you create in the world. Please do go check him out. This is amazing. I think we're all going to be like looking at the way we're doing things now and being able to kind of interact and have an awareness about what we're doing and how we're, creating things in the world. So thank you very much for having me. I'm going to stop the live stream right now. Let's just make sure I can do that. It's like the